about team building through deception. Thanks, Chris.
So, can everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
Yeah. Cool. This is a bit more AV than I was expecting. A few more lights, a few more cameras. It's three more cameras than I thought were going to be here. So we'll see how well I do on those later in the edit. So I'm Chris Hoult, team building through deception. Who am I? I'm a senior software engineer at DataSift, which is a Reading-based startup. We started off as the people who invented the retweet button, and now we're the world's independent reseller of Twitter's Firehose, for example. I could go into a lot more detail about that later, but that's not what I'm here for. The only thing I'll point out is our strapline is we're hiring. Previously, I was a senior engineer at Time Out, the magazine in London and not the biscuit, and at Pure Innovation, which is a small agency that did kind of CRM kind of solutions. I also did the first commits on Funding Circle, if you've seen the ads for that recently. I also act. This is me reenacting Gone with the Wind. I just throw that in there in the hope that I get a chuckle, thank you. So, team building. We're all hopefully used to the idea of team building exercises. Everyone kind of gets shoved in a room. You get a blindfold shoved on you. Someone else gets a whistle. You get that whistle blown, and you have to navigate an obstacle course. So you're put in a field, and you get 2 drums and a plank, and you've got to get from one imaginary place to another imaginary place. And it's all a bit kind of mandatory fun. Hands up if you don't like audience participation. So what I found is engineers we're a cynical bunch. I'll extend that to the Geek community in general. We're fairly solitary by habit. We don't go in for mandatory fun days. We don't go into that kind of forced fun. We view those team building exercises as, why am I doing this? I could be sat in front of a computer or soldering something. Why am I engaging in this unrealistic, patronizing exercise to, in fact, build us into a team? In such a way, you kind of get this rebellion when people are told, we're going to build you into a team by shoving you into this room, forcing you into this team, shoehorning you in. And that doesn't really fit my philosophy. I much prefer, instead of shoving people into that situation, crushing them together, it doesn't actually get buy-in in the way that you really need when you're building a team. So instead, what you need to think about is osmosis. Does anyone get the reference? Sweet. Osmosis Jones. Yeah? The one person who's seen the movie. Great. 2. Great. So so if we learn by osmosis, if we learn just by experiencing, if we learn by social engineering, so that we're put into a position where we take on the lessons that we need, but we're not actually being forced to learn them, so they're not being shoved down our throats, then it might take a little bit longer to get that message across. But at the end of the day, you'll have less rebellion on your hands, you'll have less resistance to yourself, to your team building exercises, and you'll actually find people take things on in a kind of a constructivist fashion. So they do the thing and learn by doing that, as opposed to being told, this is how you form a team, here's the leader, here's what you do, here's what you follow. My solution is games, which hopefully a few of you have played around the room. Games teach you a bunch of things, and you have fun at the same time. Hopefully you have fun at the same time. If you're not, what's the point in playing the game? At DataSift, we've kind of got an inherent games culture. It started off organically, so a lot of what I'm telling you is more about observation than distinct setup to get the team building side of things. But this is kind of what I've observed. Most of our engineers are predisposed to playing games. They enjoy the games, they know them, they bring them in, they introduce them to everyone else. Just to show I've had a little bit of research behind this, here's the definition of a game. Basically, people love fighting, people love coming together as tribes, as teams. They love to come out with a common objective, a quantifiable outcome. You win, basically. We at DataSift play hidden identity games quite a lot. So we play a game called Bang, which is where you've got outlaws, you've got a sheriff, and you've got renegades. The sheriff is there to be alive at the end of the game. The renegade is there to be the last man alive, so he's got to kill everyone else. The outlaws want to club together and kill the sheriff. The twist is that everyone has a hidden identity up front and has no clue of who else on that in that game is what identity. And you've got to spend that time working out who everyone is throughout the game. As people get picked off one by one, you put all that information together and you start figuring out exactly who's on your side and who isn't. You've got the Resistance and Avalon, which are very similar. In fact, Avalon's kind of a descendant of the Resistance, and that's where you've got spies and the Resistance. The Resistance are trying to complete missions. The spies are there to disrupt those missions and cause them to fail. And again, these are places in which you learn how to build a team. You learn that in a kind of an emergent fashion. They arrive out of logic. They arrive out of your observations. They arrive out of you having fun and clubbing together with people who at the beginning, although you know Dave's the guy sat across the table, you don't know if you can trust him or not. But by his very actions, by the way that he conducts himself both to yourself and in the rest of the game to the other players, you can figure out, is he on your team? You can club together with him. And you can see these little kind of tribes forming. The spies trying to hide themselves, the Resistance coming outright and stating that they're on the team. And by the end of it, you've got your outcome. You've got the win for the spies, or you've got the win for the Resistance. What that ends up doing is going through, well, from my observation anyway, is through the 4 stages of team building as defined by Bruce Tuckman: forming, storming, norming, and performing. So forming is where you're coming together as a team. You're put in the same room, you're put in the same situation, and you have an idea of the goal that you wish to achieve, at least in the beginning. Storming is that bit where you're kind of prodding each other, you're having a fight, you're figuring out who everyone is. And in the hidden identity games, what you're doing is you're testing who they are. You're accusing them of being a spy. They're reacting to that and saying, definitely not, but you can tell. Through that process, you end up with norming. You start working in fits and starts. You start having teamwork come out of that process, and you achieve steps towards your goal, but maybe not in the most efficient way possible. Sorry to go straight back. Maybe not in the most efficient way possible, but you started going through there. And what you find, and I haven't put the diagram up, but you find that you go through a cycle of storming and norming. You find that you get a bit done, then you really hate the guy you're with, then you get a bit more done, and you have another argument and a fight, and eventually you get to a point where you're performing, where you're achieving your goals efficiently. And that might be where you're getting to the end of the game, where you've figured out exactly who, through your logic, through your observation, you figured out exactly who's on your team. And you are coming together with your team to get to that end game and to get to the goal and to win right at the end. So what you see in the Resistance, for example, you see the Resistance themselves, the non-spies, figuring out exactly who each other are, coming to that certainty with each other and sprinting to that finish. You'll see an acceleration towards the win at the end. And the same with Avalon and so on. Avalon's a bit more complicated with a bit more disruptive influences in terms of roles being thrown in. But at the end of the day, it's a very similar process. And that leads to trust. So you're teaching yourself in a lunchtime, as we do, or a regular kind of coming together, same people learning the game, bringing new people into the game and testing them out in this uncomplicated, unforced, in this casual setting, where you can work out exactly who this person is. You can fold them into the group. You can see by their actions and not by your preconceptions of them whether you should trust them or not. You can see that your fellow player, who you know that you trust, trusts them, and that therefore you can start bringing them into your kind of sphere of trust, to coin a really cheesy phrase. But the idea is there. That's a really creepy picture to introduce trust. Anyway, so you're there, you're building trust, overcoming these preconceptions, and in doing so, you're forming that kind of practice. You're practicing building trust in other people. You're practicing observing them quantifiably and a bit less qualitatively. So you're not necessarily looking to see what you really think of them. You're looking to see what they bring to the team, and you're looking to see by their actions and not by how you necessarily view them. Inch by inch, playing the game over and over again, you're learning these vital skills by osmosis. What you also see is emergent leadership. At DataSift, we had, we now have a senior team leader who, at the time when I first put these ideas together, wasn't in a leadership position. He wasn't a line manager. And through playing the game, you could observe easily, very straightforward, who the natural leaders in your team are. You can see who kind of steps up to the mark, who has the respect of others, who has the trust of others, even if he betrays that right at the end, by the way. But you can see how he can lead people and how he can inspire confidence. And you can see how people observe that and how they can aspire to inspire that confidence. And as a result, while it didn't necessarily feed into the final appraisal, he's been promoted now. He is now a line manager, having been observed doing these things. The other thing it does, as hopefully you can all agree, is socializing. So not only is it bringing you together in a way that otherwise the guy in the other department wouldn't necessarily encounter you because he's not working with you day to day. It's allowing you to bring different tribes of your company together. It's allowing to bring different departments together. For example, our CEO, whenever he's in the office, is there playing the games with us at lunchtimes. And it's very much from his viewpoint, from his leadership, that we've taken this love of games into the company. So it's a great equalizer. In that game, you're not bringing personal grudges. You're not bringing your ideas of what that person is in terms of their station. You're accusing the CEO of this big company that he is a spy and he always will be a spy. But you're there, you're leveling that. Because it's cross-team, because it's cross-functional, you're also encountering people in sales who might be at the same organizational level as you, but because you're so deep into the product, you're so deep into your engineering organization, you'd never encounter these guys day to day, and yet they're at lunchtime, they're after work, they're at this social event, you're meeting them, you're making friends with someone who otherwise you have no contact with whatsoever. But not all these games work for this kind of thing. A game that springs to mind is Cards Against Humanity. From the Sniggers around, yes, we know what that's about. That's a bit divisive, to say the least. It's great when you've got a group of people who already know each other, who know the boundaries that you can push, but it's not there to actually be a team thing, and it really enforces an us and them if you're kind of hiding this thing away that's kind of shouldn't be done in front of HR, for example. The other thing is that while deception and this osmosis kind of idea is really useful, deception can actually endanger that trust that you've been working towards. That it can endanger the relationships. We do get stereotype behavior at work. We do have people every week accusing the same people of being spies, regardless of evidence. And that's a little flaw in my theory, sure, but that's little things to look out for. And if you're not careful, that kind of thing can run away. That kind of thing can become quickly a bullying kind of aspect of your culture. However, with a quick kind of word, hopefully the line managers in place can calm that thing down. And generally, at the end of the day, because it's a very relaxed environment, anything said in that heat of the moment gets left there. And again, that's a really nice way of learning how to separate your professional from your social life, from separating the professional from the personal. If you have a grudge, fine, you can learn to leave it on the battlefield, and when you really need to perform, you can actually get out there and work with that person. But, my final but, at the end of the day, it's a hell of a lot of fun. Just bring it in to the company, even if you've got a small number of people to begin with, you'll find that people kind of wander in, wander out. You find the groups growing and shrinking. But at the end of the day, playing games with your friends, playing games in a societal kind of fashion is really all about fun. And that's kind of the end of my thesis. Thank you very much. If anyone has any comments or questions or wants to bring up Werewolf as an example of a hidden identity game, feel free. But yeah, here's my details, and thank you very much.
So, have you got any metrics?
Have we got any metrics? Because each game is independent of the previous one, they wouldn't necessarily show anything except the effectiveness of the strategies that we're using during those gameplays. And because we're not necessarily able to quantify or measure how much people are working as a team together in that environment, we can't necessarily draw metrics and use metrics to measure that outside. So in terms of translating this into a measurable outcome, it's got to be qualitative. Well, sometimes it overruns the lunch period, sure. But these games are all playable within 15 minutes if you don't have much prevaricating. We've had individual ones last up to an hour because people just can't make their minds up. So you find that some of these games do take a bit longer. Other times you can get through one in 5 minutes and get 3 done in an hour at lunch. And you get people eating through lunch. We sustain up to 10 or 11 players in each of these games as well. In terms of bang, anyway, we figured out rules by which we can expand the numbers of players by increasing the deck and adding more powers and stuff like that. Cool, well, thank you very much. Oh, no.
Is there a noticeable difference then between people who do join in the games and people who don't in terms of how quickly they become team members, or do they just have to join?
There is a difference, but it's really hard to associate that with not taking part in the games and being relatively solitary themselves. I mean, one of the things about organizing the games is hopefully, and my observation is that this is the case, people don't feel that they're forced to join the games, and they don't feel that they're necessarily missing out in their sense from that kind of thing. You might find that they have a little bit of, oh, I could be in that gang kind of approach, but for the most part it's their choice to not partake. And indeed, when people start, and even on interview days, we invite them to join the games and just bring them in. If they don't want to, then that's up to them, and it would entirely be our fault and be wrong if we're the ones who frowned upon that kind of thing.
And do you sort of then, presumably there are some people who come into your organisation and they don't, regardless of the game, they just don't fit. Do you spot it in the game more or in the workplace?
Well, I've got to be a little careful as I'm on camera. But there are certain qualities that have been observed in 1 or 2 people who are no longer with us that were observed during the game. Part of a much bigger tapestry of behavior or non-behavior. However, you could say that there is a correlation between how they are in the game and how they are outside of the game. And again, another one of the buts is when you surround yourself with games, when you surround yourselves with the trappings of startups and all these wonderful creative stuff, you do get some people who just take the mick a bit. So you've got to look out for that kind of thing. But yes, in general, every now and then you can spot people who just will never fit. Hopefully it takes a little bit of time to learn the game, but not too long. And that might be an indicator as to how they might work in the more engineering fashion.
What's the best anecdote from the games you played in?
Oh, well, my favorite anecdote was that leadership, was spotting that now team lead from within that. Because it validates my theory for a start. But it's just generally, all I can really say is we have a lot of fun. There is a lot of accusation of being a spy throughout for 1 or 2 individuals. But for the most part, I mean, personally, I like to accuse a specific individual of being a spy, and whether he gets angry or not, that's how I know whether he's a spy or not. That happens frequently, and then the end of lunchtime starts to happen, and then someone shouts, "Let's hurry up," and whatnot. And it's really, you end up either having a flip of the coin situation, or you have just a force, I'm going to vote whatever, and push it through. There are some controls to stop the game from stalling, but not necessarily in a time limit front.
Are you a spy?
Sometimes I am, but as an actor, it's really hard to tell.
So how long did it take you to notice that the guy had kind of leadership skills?
You know, to be fair, there's a little bit of cheating. I know that he has the respect of a number of people around.
Okay.
But it's really clear that when he says this is the case, when he says, well, it must be this, it's really clear that other people are listening to him. So it's quite an immediate observation. And now that he's in a position of leadership as opposed to quasi-leadership, if you like, it's even more obvious to kind of connect the dots. But that kind of forceful personality is the wrong thing, but someone who gets respect from what they say, someone who gets people following them, that's another place. And you know, people can start to learn the skills of leadership through this in terms of how to influence people, in terms of how to nudge them along in the kind of social engineering way that I kind of mentioned earlier.
So do you find your acting skills specifically help you with these kinds of games?
My acting skills help me in terms of direct accusations of being a spy or not, or being an outlaw or a renegade or not. And I can stare down the best of them in doing that with my poker face that I can put on. But in general, other than my observation of behavior that I might have picked up through my acting, and you have to observe people's movement and their facial expressions and the way they say things to kind of pick up the nuances of realistic acting. So that might have helped me in terms of giving me an advantage playing the game. But in terms of any other level, I'm not sure that it's given me too much of an advantage.
Do you only do it for engineers, or do you do it for other job families?
No, we have sales engineers are in there. We have the actual sales guys. We have marketing drop in and out. We've got HR have played a couple of times. It's really whoever wants to join in and whoever kind of makes that leap to come in.
And it's the same format for all of those different job descriptions?
Well, they're joining the main game. It's bringing those general people together rather than separating out into a marketing game, into an engineering game or not. It's a kind of a free-for-all, if you like, and a join-in. And that's where it really gives us an advantage. We've got people who work on the deepest, darkest bits of the platform who'd never talk to sales. Sales are always on their phone and talking about customers. So they don't necessarily have the chance to talk to the engineers underneath or have the opportunity. But this gives them that chance to meet new people within the company who, because of the nature of their jobs and the nature of their day-to-day, they wouldn't necessarily meet.
So I suppose the question is, how would you get this to work in a really big business?
So in terms of
One game for the entire company.
well, first off, it would be to start that off. Most businesses are separated into departments or at least business units in such a way that you can separate them just to make them smaller, basically. So you could start the seeds of a game and make a conscious effort to invite people in. I've been very clear about not forcing them in or anything like that. But through that seeds, you get people kind of joining through that, seeing the fun, seeing that they can step away from their desk with their lunch during a lunch break, still remain in the office but be able to meet everyone across. And then that becomes a question of how do you communicate culture across. So it's just about getting that kind of beachhead, that kernel of game playing. Having not introduced it to another company yet, not until I've run out of this one, I couldn't necessarily give you a surefire way of doing that, but my thoughts are start off small and watch it grow. Cool. All right then. Thank you very much.